No Chaser, and we finally done it. We finally have gotten to the episode about weed. Now, weed, in terms of recovery or addiction, alcoholism and all that fun stuff, it actually ironically riles a lot of people up on like how people normally are when they smoke weed. And as one thing, I just want to preface by saying, I myself, I've enjoyed both drugs and alcohol. I always like to say I have dual citizenship, but I never really liked weed.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
But, well, here's the thing. I never really liked weed of its effects. I actually am like a pretty big weed advocate for its general use and, what it like. I've always kind of put it as like way better than alcohol in a sense. I mean, I enjoyed alcohol way more. I believe I'd feel that even if I was an alcoholic for its effects. But like I always put it down like this where, weed just seems a lot better because just imagine you're walking down an alley and you have a choice of two people that are going to be walking down, coming towards you. One is a very, very drunk person and one is a very, very high person, high off weed. Which one are you picking? I mean, we just, it seems benign in a lot of ways. And I will say this, and I will, so honestly, there's been many times, quite a few more than I'd expect, where people have said that they are addicted to weed. People have come into treatment and, outpatient programs I've been a part in, Narcotics Anonymous meetings I've been a part of, and they've said they're addicted to weed. And look, I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't a part of me that was kind of like, really? Weed? And I know that, honestly, I try to like fully embrace the idea that anything destroys your life, anything you're addicted to. I mean, you could be addicted to like working out and that could like ruin your life. Anything that ruins your life is a serious problem and should be treated seriously. But I must say, I usually am a much gentler towards it. Some people have a much more hostile sort of sentiment when people are in treatment, especially, and they're addicted to weed. It kind of usually goes something like this.
I'm here today because I'm addicted to marijuana.
Hell no! You in here for some marijuana? Marijuana? Man, this is some bullshit!
Marijuana is not a drug. I used to suck dick for coke.
I seen them!
Now that's an addiction, man. You ever suck some dick for marijuana?
Huh?
R.I.P. Bob Saget. But, I mean, it's because weed, it doesn't have that acute nastiness of it's like hyper sinking its claws into your brain as like meth or heroin or, even alcohol does to people. And it like, you talk about the consequences, like a lot of people aren't like committing crimes just to get weed. I mean, there's like drug dealers for weed, but like they're not like committing crimes and, stealing Cadillac converters or, just destroying their lives over weed or committing domestic abuse over weed or losing their kids over weed. I mean, it's tough, but like, again, I try to come with the sentiment that if something is ruining your life and making it a lot worse, then it should be treated as a serious problem. And I know, especially like I've known people, a few even close to me, that weed has played a really bad part in their life because they've had they've had clinical depression. And this is a sentiment I've heard from a lot of people, but especially even personally, where infusing their use daily, hour by hour use of weed into the depression just made it like plummet. It took them to really bad places. It's like some people having to like get real like intervention and becoming suicidal and like, the way that weed had like kept them in that dark hole was, I mean, really troubling. And it was a really serious problem. And, weed still has, it is, a psychoactive substance that brings relief, brings, good feeling, like, and the brain can just latch onto that too. Like it can latch onto that just as hard. Well, okay, see, there's the thing. I was about to say just as hard as other drugs, but it seems like not really, as far as people, again, that use meth or just are horribly addicted to alcohol. But it seems like it reaches in and it could pull apart people mentally. There's been plenty of studies and information regarding like people that smoke weed at a very young age and how that affects their brain chemistry. I mean, it's not completely harmless by any means, for sure. But I would think that it's not complete consensus, but generally accepted that as far as like the totem pole of like substances goes, weed is like pretty much at the bottom. Like it everything that comes with smoking weed and the the states it puts you in. And I mean, there's all those outlier stories. You can find outlier stories for a lot of things. Some people get really paranoid and it sends them, if they have like any sort of predisposition to mental illness of the more serious nature, it could send them into a complete psychotic state. It like I said, the thing about depression or weed can also be dangerous in this way where it can send people into relapse in this very like subtle and insidious way. It kind of is like a Trojan horse where it's like weed's not that bad, and then they start smoking and it reinvigorates that sort of instant gratification, finding relief from substances and chemicals, and then it is a trail that leads back to their drug of choice. However, I'll do a whole nother episode about kind of the pitfalls of weed use, and for some people though, honestly, and this is more, I know it's anecdotal, but I know this has happened for a lot of people too. It even has its own phrase, like California sober. I've had friends that back in my drug days of heavy opiate use, that they, over the years, they were getting really bad, met with overdoses. Unfortunately, some people I know in those circles have died, and they went over to weed. And mind you, they're not smoking it in like a normal sort of fashion, like people that just generally enjoy it. Like they smoke it like every day, like in an addicted way, but their life is like much better. It's much more manageable. Like, is their life super awesome? Are they completing the goals that they've wanted? Are they like being the best parent or being the best, person in a relationship or being the best citizen or coworker? Or are they doing all that stuff? No. But it is by far a lesser of the two evils, and some people would argue like, well, life is not about just choosing the lesser of two evils. You need to reach your, potential and, fulfillment and all that stuff, which is, I mean, something I agree with in a lot of points. But I mean, this just kind of goes down to your general philosophy about life, where it's just like, maybe this is for the best if somebody can live a life that doesn't have the danger, especially of like the opiate use, like the danger of dying from it, the danger of doing irreversible damage. Like maybe that easier, sort of softer way is the better way. So yes, I mean, they're totally dependent on weed, but I mean, things aren't too bad. They maybe eat Taco Bell too much, stuff like that. But again, it is very, I've talked with people about it, and people, there's definitely some like big book thumpers. Those that don't know, that's like the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, like main book. They call it the big book. It's very weird. A lot of people will say it, and originally I thought they kept talking about the Bible, and I'm like, why do they got to bring the Bible into this? But no, it's a Bible for Alcoholics Anonymous, basically. But big book thumpers, where it's total abstinence and total sobriety, and even doing weed is like, that's how much I don't smoke weed. I said doing weed. But smoking weed is like, you can't do that. And I mean, not even just people in AA or NA or anything like that. Honestly, there's a lot of other, recovery programs where it's just like, you can't be smoking weed because it is still, it's activating that sort of instant gratification model of your brain, the always being dependent on mood altering substances, even if they're not that bad. Like, you can't be doing that. And I mean, it's not going to put you in as dire of a situation as some other drugs or alcohol can do, but it can if it leads you back to doing hard drugs and alcohol. But, when we talk about like, can people get addicted to weed? I would simply say, well, yes. People, like, I don't think that's very much in question. Like, of course people can get addicted to it. I mean, really, this falls into the nuance of like, the question of like, how serious do you take an addiction to marijuana? And again, I always fall back on, if it's something that is extremely detrimental in someone's life, it should absolutely be taken serious. Like, who cares what you're addicted to? You could be addicted to like using Q-tips or something. If it's somehow destroying your life, then it should be taken with like a lot of consideration, And I think where some people like come back at this, as shown in the clip before, it's like, well, I mean, it doesn't like super destroy your life in the ways that like other drugs and alcohol do, but I've always come across to the point where it's just like I keep myself from any sort of judgment, even though it's like, again, if I'm being fully candid, it's really hard because I'm just like, man, really, you threw your life away over pot. But I try to like just push that out, and I try to remember these things I should remember, how it has like damaged other people's lives. But again, that always has the caveat of like it's related to some or other mental disorder or mental illness they have. But if it's doing that, then 100%. And this goes to a larger point where, if anybody's trying to be in recovery for something, you should give them their full support. One of those things that you hear a lot is just like, take them at their word, especially when people talk about their own struggles. Like, it doesn't need to have this template of like how bad something is and these certain consequences that you have to have before you take it seriously. And I would say even beyond like drug and alcohol addiction or sex addiction or gambling or anything, like just anything in people's lives where they have some sort of issue and they're really trying to overcome it. Like, not only give full support, but like give support and give them credence of this, like, it is serious. If it's serious to this person, you care about this person, then it is serious, no matter what. No matter how much in your like head you might be rolling your eyes, or no matter how much you think that like, oh man, do they really want me to like, I mean, this is one problem. It's like, if people are trying to like equate their addiction to weed as bad as an addiction to someone with, meth or heroin or fentanyl or alcohol or anything like that, that's where like you start to have some like clashes going on of opinion. And even then though, I think if you're in that position, or some people that are in that position, even then put your sort of, if you can, I know I must like put any sort of like seriousness to myself, and it's not just so much practicing humility, it's more so practicing humanity. Don't have this mindset of like, well, I don't know if I'm going to take advice for them or suggestions or like how much I'm going to listen to them, because they think that this thing they have is just as bad as mine, and mine's way worse. That is a negative thought pattern that a lot of people fall into, where they specialize their problem as something way worse than others. I mean, in the world, if you just live in society long enough, someone always has it worse than someone else. Like the relativity of how bad your problems are to other people should not hinder you from getting support for yourself and giving support. So that's basically just a spiel I wanted to give. We'll probably do some other episodes about weed. It's very interesting, and like I said, the irony of like the laid back pot smokers who they get all sorts of riled up, and people in recovery get pissed off, and people yell and argue about the prevalency of weed, and just want to be like, everybody should chill out, man. And all right, anyways, less serious episode, which I think it's always fun to throw in, and you know what, like, share, tell your friends, comment your opinions. Like I said, this is going to be a touchy or opinionated subject. Feel free to comment below. And other than that, be well.